So hi everyone, thank you for joining me and Carlos, who will be guest speaking during the next hour or so that we have for this interesting topic about national transformation in Latin America. And I will be hosting the session, and as I said, I will have Carlos jumping in, sharing some key insights, particularly when we look at what is the context around Costa Rica that is going to be the business case that we will be sharing with you. For those that don't know me, I'm Roberto Chaverri. I'm partner and head of Latin America, Engage, Innovate, and Strategy Tools. And I'm always saying very proud to say that I am the first official Strategy Tools Global Coach. So that is quite an honor. And also a fellow master trainer. And with that, I'll let Carlos introduce yourself, Carlos.
Oh, yes. Well, some of you already know me, but I'm a consultant working with Roberto for over a year. Very happy to be on these exciting new strategy tools and engage innovate world. We're gonna share with you one of our recent engagements in Costa Rica and representing the opportunities that we're seeing in the region. That meaning that as Latin America. I retired from Ernst & Young 18 months ago, and it's been quite a ride. I mean, listening to the previous 2 days conferences on how the world has changed and what are the opportunities. I was actually referring to Roberto yesterday, saying that it's a whole new ball game. No one has actually uh, definite lead. So here we are. Thanks for your attention.
And as I said, we're going to use Costa Rica as a good business case on how to conduct national transformation in the region, in Latin America. Many of these learnings, I think that can apply as well to other regions, development countries particularly. But what we see also is many of these practices and learnings being applied in other regions that have more experience with clusters, like in the case of Canada. So it shows at the end of the day that these principles on building ecosystems and building clusters can be applied regardless of the region. And what we need to understand is what are the particularities of each region. And Javier started his presentation yesterday about how they're building clusters in Mexico, saying that when he started looking at this topic, he really didn't know that much about clusters. And it was kind of similar when I went through the Global Coach certification process back in 2018. It was the first time that I really heard about such a comprehensive platform to build these big ecosystems and to really take some strategic sectors within a country to the next level. And it has been quite a journey from back in December 2018 to the work that we were able to do in 2020. So before getting into details, we're going to cover pretty much 5 topics, a very quick snapshot on Latin America and the Caribbean to provide some context of the whole region, some of the biggest challenges and opportunities, because this will help understand why the decisions that Costa Rica has been taking and how the work on superclusters fit within those opportunities and challenges. Carlos will take us over about what happened in Costa Rica, when did it really start changing its economic model, and that is really how we get to the stage where we are. And as I say this as a Costa Rican, in terms of the new development model and how superclusters play a role in that, and how we as Engage Innovate are playing a role and using the strategy tools platform to really build the capability required to build these ambitious agenda of becoming a global player in specific arenas. So very quickly, Latin America and the Caribbean is a very large region, about 643 million, which will make it, after the sub-Saharan African region, the second largest. If we consider South Asia Pacific without India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, then this is the second largest region, even larger than the European Union. We can understand Latin America in four really different clusters. One is Mexico, one is Central America, the one that you see here, the Caribbean, and then South America. Obviously, being South America the largest, and this is important to understand because there are different dynamics going on in this region. The trade agreements that are in place differ significantly and change the commercial opportunities. And actually, we're going to talk about a little bit about the economic integration in the region as a big opportunity. We are in the mid to low income class. As you see, Mexico as a country has almost $10,000 per capita, GDP per capita, while it's much lower in Central America. Even though Costa Rica and Panama are above the average with 12, 13,000, the other countries really take this average down. And you see, due to the size of South America, the average for the whole region is about 8,500 GDP per capita, which again sets the region in still in development stage. Some of the biggest challenges and opportunities for the region, obviously one is dealing with and recovering from COVID-19. Latin America more or less has accounted for 20% of total worldwide active cases. That trend is coming down. Now it's 10%. Obviously, this depends on certain reporting dues from some markets, but it has been the most impacted developing region in the world. The decline in terms of economic for the next for this year is expected to be the worst economic contraction in 120 years. And really the expectations is, if you are even some optimistic, that the recovery might take no less than 5 years. And obviously a lot of people talk about even impacting a whole generation. So this is some of the leading countries in terms of reported cases. By each 100,000, you can see that due to the size, countries like Colombia, Brazil, Mexico, Argentina are being the ones with the biggest number of cases, as well as deaths. Corruption is quite important, and I will say that it is also one of the reasons why it is hard at sometimes to really build successful national projects. It's terrible in some countries like, for example, Guatemala, not even to say Venezuela. Violence and different type of violence violence remains a big challenge across the regions. In some cases, more inner city violence. In some other cases, more drug related, gang related. So violence always represents a big challenge. Fiscal imbalances, again, with some countries being worse than others. Carlos can may reference a little bit later on what is the situation, for example, in Costa Rica. It's pretty stable in many areas, but in the fiscal sense is struggling. Obviously, economic growth. We need to pretty much double the growth rate to start closing the gap with the developed world. So this is something that particularly I get really worried about when we talk about clusters and when we talk about the industries of the future, because there is already a significant gap when we compare against the developed markets and countries. The risk of these developed countries really being the ones taking advantage of these new technologies and innovation. These technologies are exponential, so the gap will can even become exponential as well. So this is really a fundamental question for the region on how to get up to speed and be ready to play into the industries of the future. Unemployment, which has been very bad, particularly during COVID, and inequality and wealth distribution. We know that this is also important in even in countries like the US, where we see, the level of concentration that the top 1% has in terms of wealth. So these are some of the biggest challenges, but there are good opportunities. Demographics is one. We have the second highest population percentage of people under 15 years old, and the second lowest in terms of percentage of people over 65. So we still have a young population with great opportunities to become active economic individuals and help grow the economy. Um, there's also the trend of migration from rural areas to urban areas. Latin America is the most um, urbanized region in terms of how fast it has urbanized. It is estimated that by 2050, 90% of Latin Americans will live in cities, in roughly 2,000 cities. This will be also a big opportunity, according to the World Economic Forum, in terms of all the infrastructure and all the technology and implementations of new urbanism models and mobility. There's some big opportunities behind these demographic changes that the region can take advantage. Economic and trade integration, we have specific regions, Mercosur, we have the region Andina, CARICOM, CAFTA, but we were saying that Latin America is 643 million people, and we compare it to the European Union, which is 448 million, then the opportunity of having a single market is huge. Obviously, there are many inequalities among countries that need to work out, but just as a future prospect, the possibility of building a single region is quite big. Sustainable development, again, for the region is changing the paradigm, but also opens a lot of opportunities in terms of the need for new technologies, new platforms, new business models that can really be leveraged and use Latin America also as a good, in some cases, experiment areas for new technologies. And finally, but very, very important, drive innovation and entrepreneurship. The region has proven to have the talent. Now is really the time to take advantage of that. And the World Bank, before getting into the specific case of Costa Rica, talks about key 6 growth drivers for development countries and specifically for Latin America. Increased productivity, increased competitiveness, drive innovation, education as a big, huge pillar of growth, foreign direct investment, and finally, political and economic stability. So if these are the key drivers, and we look at where our countries sit in terms of, the different indexes that are used or recognized as good indicators of how countries can be compared, look at this table in terms of the competitive index, global innovation index, doing business, and as we saw, GDP per capita. We're not even in the top 30. We don't have a country in the top 30. Chile has been recognized as this model of development within the region, and the best they can do is get close to 30 in a couple of these indexes. And finally, what we see, or what we can get, is that there are 4 countries that are, I would say, consistently in the top 4 or 5 of the region. That's Chile, Mexico, Costa Rica, and Uruguay. Thiago, Brazil still faces, huge challenges. You would expect Brazil as being one of the big 4 developing countries to do better in certain of these indexes, but we can discuss a little bit that in a couple of words. So the key question is how to drive national transformation. And with that, Carlos will take us through the Costa Rica business case, and then we can zoom in the work that we're doing with clusters in Costa Rica.
Thanks, Roberto. And I'll try to spend the next 10 minutes or so trying to put for you why Costa Rica, in this context of the Latin American challenges and opportunities, what was the differences. And of course, the political stability. Costa Rica is being known as the oldest and more stable democracy in the region. I think based on what we saw yesterday in the U.S. On the taking of the Parliament building, we're all aware of how challenging that is. But that has had an impact, a definite impact on attracting investment. The second most important pillar here is education. I will explain it later, but Costa Rica, it's investing 8% of the GDP, and actually has been investing 8% in education, and that's probably one of the highest proportion assigned to education in most countries in the world. Of course, the efficiency of that has to be a challenge also, but as a model, education has been the way to go. And this is what we call the Intel domino effect. 23 years now, Intel decided to establish a manufacturing plant, a big manufacturing plant in Costa Rica. It was so important to the country and the impact that the central bank started to publish statistics with and without Intel, because they were so big on exports, and that changed the whole configuration. Someone back then explained it as a whale getting into a bathtub, because this was a major manufacturing corporation doing business in Costa Rica. They left manufacturing, they stayed with services and design and research, and now they have just announced they're coming back and they're moving some of their production in in the Philippines back to Costa Rica. And that's an excellent sign of actually one of the positive impacts of all this pandemic. I mean, uh, big manufacturing companies looking at the opportunities to manufacture from within the region. And Intel actually started what has been now established as a very successful model, the free trade zone regimen, which is a tax, no, it's not tax free, but they have a lot of tax advantages for the companies that decide to establish their operation. And as a result of that, we will see it in a minute also. We have church services companies from I don't know 200 different major corporations worldwide, U.S. and European, and that has changed. Uh, the country has established four strategic clusters, and this is important because Roberto would actually drill down in this engagement or job that we did in order to help one of those, which is a combination of tourism, medical devices, advanced manufacturing, and corporate services. All right, and this has been done under a public-private partnership. It has been quite a challenge because there is a kind of bias towards government and against private enterprise, and most people, unfortunately, government officials now realize that we need to work more and uh, profound, go deeper into the public-private partnership. All right. So this is in pictures what I just explained you. 1948. That's a picture of the then president abolishing the army. And if you think about it, that's roughly 70 years ago, and it did have a tremendous impact. I mean, abolishing the army meant that we could dedicate that 8% to education and another big chunk to health, and and that has shaped the country. And as Roberto mentioned before, that's one of the reasons we in Costa Rica have a GDP per capita that is 80% higher than the average for Latin America. And then the solid democracy over 200 years of peaceful transfer. And it also explains the high skilled talent pool. I have personally spoken with several CEOs and human resources managers, and what they say is that they really like this the highly skilled talent. I mean, a lot of people speaks English. It's taught at schools and universities. You must take English courses, and of course, the STEM opportunities and the computer science. I mean, it has been an important factor in attracting investment. I already told you the Intel story and how that helped shape what now is this free trade zone regime. Uh, if you look at the statistics for the last 6 months, and again, you can see this is the sector that has actually recovered, is the one who actually uh, suffered probably a month or two during the first months of the pandemic, but it was the one who very soon started to pick up. And again, if you look at the central bank statistics on exports, you would see that this is the only regime that actually has pick up and go back actually stronger, and the rest of the economy is still waiting for the better times. All right, investment sector, tourism is the number one. You can imagine that it has suffered a lot with the pandemic. I mean, all flights, and just like the rest of the world, most flights were canceled. Costa Rica had uh, 3 million visitors, and that's roughly 60% of the population. So we were placed as a very attractive, uh, is coming back, but very slow. But it's still number one industry. Then the advanced manufacturing, this started with the Intel story that I just told you. It has expanded, of course. There are now 80 plus medical devices company doing uh, research, doing manufacturing in Costa Rica. I mean, the Pfizer's, the Roches, the uh, different companies, and corporate services also. I mean, is very very relevant. You would find, as I said before, hundreds of different companies that have established their global shared service or the Americas shared services operation in the country.
And Carlos, as an example, IBM has its largest cybersecurity site in Costa Rica, which was actually the tractor company to build the cybersecurity cluster.
Yeah.
So those key landmark, huge corporations have been stepping stones for building clusters and attracting new big players to the region.
And and Chris knows this because Chris actually was instrumental in the series of workshops and the work we did, hired by CINDE, which is the FDI promotion agency, but also working very close with the export promoting agency and the Ministry of Foreign Trade. Costa Rica, being such a small country, decided again 20, 25 years ago that he was going to bet on the free trade agenda and signing agreements with the most important regions in the world: Europe, the U.S., Chile. Now we have just become part of the organization uh, for cooperation. And so the question was, in this context that we just reviewed, what's next? I mean, what has to be done? And that's where we were hired to move from a sector approach to a supercluster model, and in order to get the growth, increase exports value, create jobs, and drive innovation. And of course, very challenging in times of pandemia, but that's the route, that's the north, that's the objective that the country has now. And Roberto will explain what exactly we did. So go ahead, Robert.
And it was important to provide all this context because when we think about uh, super clusters as a development transformation, national transformation model, this cannot be done the same way in Costa Rica as, for example, it has been done in Canada. I mean, it will be very hard to find a government that is capable to assigning $1 billion for 5 years for this kind of development. Or we don't have the, almost 30 years of experience that Norway has in learning and applying the super cluster model. So what was interesting is that Costa Rica has these strong economic sectors, very successful attracting foreign direct investment, consolidating a lot of multinational companies playing these sectors, probably a little bit with the exception of tourism, which is more national grounded. But in the context of COVID, and we praise ourselves at the beginning of the pandemic, how well we were dealing with it and considering what was going on. In May of this year, or sorry, last year, the president signed a decree stating that the development of health and wellness, and we will see this next, industry as a national interest, and to make Costa Rica a global hub of wellness, innovation, and life sciences. And this, let's say, leadership of doing this was kind of, I don't know if by design, left to CINDE, which is, as Carlos said, the #1 promotion agency of foreign direct investment in the world. They have done a great job bringing more than 500 multinationals to Costa Rica. And the question was, how can we position Costa Rica as a powerhouse in the life science space? And when we say a powerhouse is, how do we compete with Germany? How do we compete with Singapore? How do we compete with the Netherlands and other countries that have been already working in the life science space for quite some time? And again, this notion of a global life center hub is really complex, you know, and the first effort that CINDA did to get a grasp was to build this kind of what we call the global life center universe. And you see that it has four kind of gravitating sectors. One is well-being, which can be, for example, tied to tourism, technology industry 4.0, which has to do a little bit with these ideas of smart manufacturing, of biomaterials, for example. These kind of links again to the agrotech and biotech sectors. And then you have the health really dimension, which is the one that we started working with. And so how has Engage, Innovate helped this effort? One, we have been building cluster development capabilities across all the players. There are ecosystem builders, the ones who have to lead the effort of bringing all the pieces together. So we have been developing specific training for them. To facilitate this first strategy discussions among these key players. And third, build cluster development specifically within existing clusters like the medical devices cluster that can be and become probably a building block of this global life science hub. So the first major activity that we conducted was a workshop with teams from CINDE, COMEX, which is the International Trade Ministry from Costa Rica, and PROCOMER, which is the Exports Promotion Agency. These three work really well together, as Carlos was explaining, in a private-public partnership. And we run a four-hour, more or less, workshop with them. We focus on really understanding what are clusters, getting those nuances about, you know, what is a hub, what is a cluster, what is an ecosystem. You know, sometimes these differences are not noted, but are very, very important when it comes to developing and designing the ecosystem behind it. So that was very important. How to build innovation superclusters, the Engage, Innovate methodology, and the strategy tools platform as a way of understanding how to do this, and really where to start. And we have a great participation. As I said, people from all different regions. Okay. And then we ran also a even larger workshop with representatives of, with 72, 80 representatives from local, national governments, development agencies, international agencies like the IDB Bank, academia, and entrepreneurs. We shared not only the strategy tools platform and the Engage, Innovate approach, but also share learnings from, for example, Canada, and on how they have build the supercluster model. How is Colombia doing? How is Norway, or how has Norway been doing it for quite some time? And then we got into the strategy sessions with a first cohort of participants within the health sector that were pretty much represented by private companies, as Carlos said, Pfizer, the Roches. We had some of the chambers associated to the medical devices and health industry, people from the free trade zones, government officials, some academia, some small representatives of what we could call the entrepreneurship ecosystem. If you look at the supercluster member tool here, you see that it was mostly focused on government and corporate, which already tells the story of how much we need to build the ecosystem. We had a 3-day work. At the beginning, we worked on understanding what was the ambition, setting the objectives of what is really trying to be accomplished behind the global life science. Day 2, we focus more on the strategy, and day 3, we focus on building the roadmap. So let me just share with you some initial thoughts from the CEO of the Foreign Direct Investment Agency. Just bear with me 1 second. The lean movement, you need to think big, start small, but scale fast. Sorry, there are some technical difficulties, but let me see if I can get this.
Welcome everyone. We're extremely excited about this session. Thank you all for dedicating the time. We have right now, if I'm not mistaken, about 60 people connected, even though we have approximately 130 participants that have confirmed their participation, throughout the 3 different days. We have participants from government. I want to particularly welcome Madam Vice Deputy Minister of Presidency, Silvia Lara, who will be joining us, and representatives also from the Ministry of Foreign Trade, the Ministry of Science and Technology, and the Ministry of Health. We have presence or representatives from the academia, both public and private, local and international. We have obviously our strategic partners, the IDB, Cruza, Procomer. We have many clients, the representatives from the MedTech, the medical devices cluster, as well as many other OEMs and suppliers, and representatives from multiple chambers and financial organizations as well. And I'd like to welcome also our members of the board of directors and associates, seen the associates, and a particular warm welcome and thank you to the associates and members of the board who participated recently in the committee that presented a lot of insights, and I guess what we could call sort of like the jumpstart for this work that we'll be realizing in these 3 days of hard work and these workshops, and which gives us an initial vision of where we can go. Of course, our partners in crime, Christian Rangen, Roberto Chaverri, and Carlos Gallegos, thank you very much. Well, we're all here, obviously, to see how we can give form. If we can move to the next slide, please. Based on this declaration of public interest by the government, how we can give life and form to this ecosystem, with 3 large areas, which are well-being, Industry 4.0, agri-tech and biotech and health, and along, outside of those areas of opportunity, which obviously I won't go into at this moment, and the enablers that we see in the middle of this.
So as you can see, it was a very significant point in time to get this out of the ground. As Jorge was saying, the CEO, it was very important to get this many people in the room, to get this key government official and key enabling participants like the IDB to have a in-depth discussion of how to build such a large and massive ecosystem that has been understood as a hub that can bring many of these different industries together and really attract significant investment to Costa Rica. So we really went through some of the tools that most of you familiar, or you're starting to learn about. We're starting with the pre-assessment card, really trying to get a sense of what is the national perspective behind the development of such an ecosystem, such a supercluster. And we got 6 groups working in parallel. I'll show you the Miro board in a second. But, a lot of outputs. This helped us, get that context at the national level. But at the same time, identify the need of a national policy, a national supercluster policy, which we don't have. And I think that in that case, again, Canada has been a very good practice and reference point on how it's important to build that national framework as a starting point. Day 2, as I said, very, very intense days working on strategy. You can see how crowded this supercluster strategy maps are. Tons of inputs, tons of ideas, and the importance of then trying to distill all this effort and all these insights into some key elements. Jolene, I think that you might find this familiar from the experience in Malaysia of the tons of information and how important it is really to get the key elements out of so much information. We work as well in the Supercluster Lounge. It was great to start getting some common ground of what should be expected as as a first results, as the key KPIs. What are the key commitments that this group was willing to make at this point in time? Day 3, we focus more on structure. Kristen shared some of the very insightful stories from different clusters in Norway, and we were able to get a first, let's say, draft of what at least the first version of that supercluster or Global Life Center Hub board of directors should look like, and who should be the core team kicking off this kind of effort. At the same time, we had a very in-depth discussion on business models, fairly new topic, and I know that right now Victor is presenting and talking about business models, but it was really important to have the people understand, one, that this is one of the key elements that probably has been kind of left as a secondary topic of discussions among clusters, looking or being comfortable with some government funds, some international funds. Now the need to really understand how we can make sustainable long-term clusters with strong business models. And very important, the timeline, understanding what needs to be done in the next 90 days in order to get the ball rolling. Great that we got together, great that we saw the tools come into action, but really now what needs to be done? Who are those key leaders that are going to take the next step? And as I was saying, just let me share with you how we lay out the work. What we did was having a team leader. In this case, Carlos dealt with prima donnas of the group that we had, the really high profile people, and did a great job of taking the whole participants of this group throughout the different tools. We worked on the tools very intensively. We came back, we discussed key insights, and quickly we moved to the second, to the following tool. And again, in-depth discussion, capturing all the insights. So really it was about building this story, this story that starts with an ambition and has to go through really establishing real and specific objectives, understanding what problem needs to be solved, establishing a structure that can kick off the initiative and move from the strategy in paper to the strategy in action. And as you can see, we had almost 6 groups working simultaneously, 80 people, and this allowed us to really get a lot of insights. And finally, to see if there are some questions and we can open the discussion. We did a very similar exercise with the medical devices cluster, which is an existing cluster, completely configured behind corporate. So this is really all the multinationals and some local companies that are manufacturing medical devices in Costa Rica. They have been trying to move certain, let's say, common issues more on the operating side of the business rather than the strategic side. And the question is how we can bring value to this industry. How can we move from just making the products here to bringing the R&Ds and setting up the innovation, building more research, connecting to academia, not only on preparing the workforce, but really in bringing value to activity. I always say that to a certain degree, these industries and the kind of activities that they take place in Costa Rica are the, how do you say maquilas, Carlos, in English?
Rollback industries.
Yeah, of the future. So before it was putting t-shirts together, now it's doing services and manufacturing. But if we really want to take the next step and really make a leap into the industries of the future, we need to think about the innovation, the high value creation, the development of new technologies, the next generation of medical devices or whatever the sector is. And this is a little bit what we helped this cluster to discuss and also understand if we have a better medical devices cluster, can it be the building block for this larger ecosystem called the Global Life Center Hub? How do they fit within that strategy? And again, we run a similar 3 days of hard work. Here we had a different approach towards strategy, and this is interesting. Before, remember, we used a supercluster strategy map. We really wanted to get a lot of ideas. We really wanted to get different point of views and alternative routes. Here, since it is an existing cluster, we want them to be more specific. And this is why, in this case, we use the supercluster strategy intro. tool, which allowed us to have a more condensated discussion on what is that this cluster really needs to focus, and especially to give a good sense of what kind of clusters they want to be. Um, and again, very intense exercises. So now, Carlos, quickly, we want to go through some of the key lessons learned of this process and see if there are some specific questions. So let me go quickly to what we did in the case of the Global Life Center Hub. Important align vision with the ecosystem model, a hub versus a supercluster. They sound similar, but they are for me not the same. So that was important. How to leverage the existing cluster within the life science space. Quick wins build momentum. Governance and funding are top priorities to get the ball rolling. CINDE, in this case, is expected to play a key role in the early stages, and meeting stakeholder expectations require ecosystem building capabilities. Those were some of the conclusions specifically of these exercises, but Carlos can share with us the high level conclusions of this process.
Well, I think what's relevant as we as practitioners is first of all to understand that if we follow suit on what we said, I think the first day or yesterday, I don't recall now, it's tools by itself do not sell, but tools are very powerful in bringing the right conversation with the right people. And that's exactly what we did. As a matter of fact, I think looking back that we kind of forced them to have those workshops. Uh, you might argue that they were probably not ready at that time. They were still having some politicals and some other issues. We were in the middle of the pandemic, but the tools, the setups, the way, the flow of the different conversations from strategy, ambition to resources to funding, it was very, very productive. The lessons learned there, I guess, is clear long-term country model view, of course, is required, and there's been some changes in different ministries, the trade ministry, and the vice president, the deputy vice president, a vice minister, sorry, that was in charge of ecosystem has been changed. We also learned that building trust was critical from the very beginning. I mean, and one of the probably key lessons is that yeah, we have to facilitate the different conversations, but we cannot drive it to specific ends. I mean, it's important, especially when you have 80 plus people participating from different backgrounds and different industries to give them the time and the space to build trust. And I think that's really relevant. Uh, the use of and discovery of tools, we try to we try to do it in a manner of not overseeing technology. So even though, as you have seen, we use Miro and we had this interactive environment, uh, we try to not put people on the spot. I mean, there were some people, and we took them to pre uh, uh, workshop sessions in order for them to get comfortable with the technology. And I would say the most important, last but not least, is moving from straight to action quickly. We kind of had a tremendous challenge there, uh, and that's because the whole hub it's betting on something that is really relevant, which is the clinical trials and we are expecting as a country a bylaw, and that has just been announced. I think is a great news for this new year that finally the ranking officials are signing off on that clinical trials bylaws and procedures, and that's the main fuel that could actually uh, uh, get this moving. Uh, Overall, a great exercise, uh, very uh, strong in the term of participations, very strong conversations, but I think we did a great job. Of course, Chris was with us from the beginning to the end, looking at models like Roberto said, like Colombia, like Canada, like Norway was very, very relevant for what we try to convey. All right, that's it, Roberto.
Yeah, I think that we have only 60 seconds left. I just wanted to highlight that thanks to Jolene, we have now most of the platform in Spanish, so this allows us to work with a broader audience. But you know us guys, shoot us an email, a text message if you want to go deeper into the experience and some more in-depth learnings either from the process or the content. So Alan, Tiago, any final remarks before we go? Thanks for joining the conversation.
Well, congratulations. It was an amazing job. And it makes me proud of being part of such a community. Uh, Great work. Congratulations, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, very inspiring.
Good. All right. So are we going back to the main room, Jolene, or?
Yes. Thank you for the great presentation, Roberto and Carlos. I have pasted the link to join the main session again. It starts at in 10 minutes, so you can have a 10-minute break, coffee, refill, whatever.
Let me ask one final question, please. Sorry to interrupt you, Jolene.
No problem.
What are your next steps within this ecosystem? Because I can imagine that you develop several connections, and it might emerge different business opportunities for you guys.
Yes,
there.
You are absolutely right, Tiago. And actually, we're working in three different fronts, I would say. One is getting a new mandate from CINDE, which was the main client. Second, working with the government on what we call, and you've seen it in some of the tools, the regional strategy, the regional approach for the clustering. And that's where I took the time to mention that there's a change of command there. And a third one would be to actually work closer with some of the clusters on actually helping them operate or implement the kind of roadmap that we constructed with them.
So you are going to keep working in the layer, in this macro layer, and not going into companies and businesses itself.
No, actually, that's what I said. Three different fronts, working with the CINDE as the main driver, working with higher up with the government, especially the Ministry of the Presidency office, and then on a lower level, working with specific clusters, the medical devices clusters. But those are different strategies, and we'll see what comes out.
If you recall, Tiago, the national supercluster framework that has those three levels, one of the gaps and recommendations is that there's no national policy yet. So you have the disconnection of someone is trying to put together the national program. Some clusters are already there. Some others are trying to set up new clusters. And and then this seen as a big player trying to drive a supercluster. So you know that on one hand opens several fronts, but on the other, we're trying to bring the conversation to one single point that can trigger really building the national framework. So those are the multiple opportunities that we have in front of us.
Really nice. I
Right.
think the key word is continuity, isn't it? Because here in Brazil, I can see the contrary. In the beginning of the 21st century, I heard a lot of the local productive arrangements, mostly from a benchmarking from Italy. But I know maybe on the 2010s, I could see that there was a discontinuity. And for these macro policy strategies, it's really a problem when a new government arrives and
Yeah.
discontinues everything. So,
Yeah, the long-term view is critical. That's it. As we
Thank you, Janine. I think that we need to go now. So guys, let's chat and happy to get together to further discuss how we can collaborate within the region in any opportunities.
thank you. See you in the main plenary.